Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagen, and we are back here in studio for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of Iowa's #1 conservative podcast. It's John Hendrickson and myself here today. Welcome, John.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
It is. There's a lot of new exciting things today.
Yeah.
One is we actually have a cameraman today.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not as exciting as I wanted it to be because as soon as he pressed play, he walked out of the room.
Yeah.
But
well, he's missing out on a lot of insights and analysis.
Yeah. We have a production staff though now.
That's right.
I mean, it really feels big time. So, well, good. We exciting. We're gonna have the ITR Live Christmas get together here in the office later today.
Yes,
so
yeah.
It's really just about the podcast. It's not
That's
about
right.
all the other things that the organization
Yeah.
does either. So, well, very good. So you and I have been kicking around a lot of different things that we need to talk about, and it's a little bit scatterbrained sometimes. But I want to start with one that I know that you really couldn't care less about. So, which is being that you're not really much of a sports fan, but Shohei Ohtani, which we had to kind of explain to you.
I never heard of him before.
Major League Baseball pitcher signed the biggest free agent contract in the history of American sports. I might have been world sports, but I know it's for sure American sports. So he is a outfielder and pitcher and signed a 10-year, $700 million contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers. So he's Japanese. He's a huge draw. Probably will make much more than that for the Dodgers over the course of this contract. So do we care about that organizationally? No, not really. Although I did find something this morning I thought was kind of interesting, was that of the $70 million a year that he is due to receive, is he's only taking $2 million of it, and the other $68 million is deferred, presumably after this contract has run. And one of the reasons for that is tax avoidance.
Mm.
So because Los Angeles being in California, high tax state, he's going to miss out on a lot of taxes, right?
That's right.
So do you care yet?
I do.
Okay.
I think, there's a lesson there I'll share after your...
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think the lesson is that he's going to move to Iowa after his playing days are over, but you never know.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
But
we have a beautiful state.
yeah. So I looked this up. So here in the next few years, we are going to be at 3.9% on our flat tax rate here in Iowa. Probably going much lower than that, depending, and maybe to zero, depending on, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But let's say that the legislature this year comes in and we're at a few years from now are somewhere in the mid twos, just hypothetically. I think that's reasonable. The top marginal rate in California is 12.3% on any earnings over $700,000. That is 10% of his income difference between how his income is treated in California versus Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money.
It is, yeah.
And I don't know that anyone's necessarily going to feel bad for somebody like Shohei Ohtani because he's getting paid a lot of money. But in my rough math, that the difference between being taxed on that income in California versus taxed on that income in a place like Iowa, or even worse, even more, a no income tax state, it's over $8 million a year.
That's
10% of his income.
Yeah.
So, like these real world example, and not the reason that we do this is not so that the Shohei Ohtanis of the world can get a break.
Yeah.
However, it's important to point out that the difference between red states and blue states is real money.
It is, absolutely.
And it's not just for the super wealthy.
Yeah. And one interesting thing about California and even our neighbors to the north in Minnesota, both have recently come out that one have increased taxes, especially on wealthy, and people are leaving both states. But also, both states are projecting large budget deficits in the near future. And so their tax and spend agenda is just not working.
Yeah. No, I want to spend some time on that in a future episode, John. You've written quite a bit about Iowa versus Minnesota. You had a piece recently. I think it was a National Review, right?
Yeah.
Talking about this and the difference between red states and blue states. And as Iowa and other states have embarked on this, I guess we'll spoil some of the conversation for later, embarked on this journey of cutting taxes. And I know you've said that just repeatedly criticized by the left as that, well, we're not going to be able to afford these tax cuts. We're not going to have enough money and you're going to starve your state. When it's in fact the blue states that wake up and don't have the money to do all the things they plan to do.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
You know, meanwhile, the Iowas of the world are funding the priorities that they've set out and giving the money back to the taxpayers, doing it the right way. It's Minnesota and California that now have giant budget holes.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, they didn't even get the benefit of the tax cuts on the front end. They just spent it all.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, you're talking about the baseball player, and it reminded me of what Andrew Mellon said, who was Secretary of Treasury under Harding and Coolidge, and for a short time under Hoover. And not that this guy's doing anything illegal, but Mellon said when you have basically high tax rates and bad tax policy, it leads to people looking for ways to avoid that.
Yes.
And so that's just one example of.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Those are the rules of the game.
Yep.
And you play by the rules of the game.
That's right.
And if there's now what's really, and this is probably, we're not ready for this conversation and we haven't spent a lot, but we talked briefly this morning too about states like California, and I think Washington State has tried some of this too, of trying to go and get those dollars when somebody moves out of the state.
Yeah.
Well, that presents a whole host of constitutional problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But how long is that? Does that arm reach?
Yeah.
When you're trying to do that, so it's fascinating. So, well, on a more practical level, John, of Iowa tax policy. You were at the Iowa Taxpayers Association annual symposium last week, and the Iowa Taxpayers Association is a little more the business tax group, business members and whatnot. But there's usually a lot of good information there. I didn't get a chance to go, but you were there.
Yes, yeah.
Specifically heard from legislators and Department of Management Director Paulsen. So I'll let you to talk about some of that because you had picked up a lot of good stuff.
Yes,
there.
It was very exciting. It was a good conference last Thursday and Friday, and I'll start with Director Paulsen, who's as you said, the director of the Department of Management, and he provided an overview of Iowa's budget and talked about really how strong Iowa's fiscal foundation is. And, the REC will be meeting tomorrow, which I think will demonstrate that as well. But basically, one thing that I was really found interesting, what Director Paulsen said, was he gave an overview of the state reorganization law that the legislature passed. And basically, of course, the big thing was going from 37 cabinet agencies down to 16. But also what he shared was the savings is just tremendous that they're finding just with duplicated services and other efficiencies going through different IT services and various other things you would find in a bureaucracy. Yeah. And so this is I think from my perspective, this was one of the best bills that came out of the session last year, or this year, I guess it was. And so it was really neat to see that. And because it doesn't sound exciting, but it's saving taxpayers a lot of money, and it's making government more efficient.
Yeah, and that's the hard work as we continue to talk about the work on the budget side. The legislature's done a great job of holding the line on spending, of making spending as a percentage of ongoing revenue less and less. But if you want to continue to do that, there's more to it than just saying no to new spending requests. Yes. It's finding the efficiencies. Yeah. And I think that's something that frankly should cross the partisan divide, is that you're getting the most for your bang for your buck. That if taxpayers are going to fund a function of government, it should work as efficiently as possible. Yeah. But some of these duplications in IT services and other things are really just because that stuff costs a lot of money.
Yeah, it adds up.
And so anyway, I think that's really good. And
one thing that I thought was really neat was Director Paulsen basically stressed, in his presentation, he said one of the reasons why we've been able to do these good policies in terms of tax reform is because we've controlled spending. You know,
Right.
and he actually showed that, you know, the argument from especially those on the left that the budget has been cut, it hasn't been cut. You know, as you said, the priorities are being funded. He showed us the amount that's going to education and other programs, and certainly nothing is being shortchanged.
Right.
And so Iowa is meeting those priorities. So it was exciting. I'm really thankful he's in that
Yeah.
role. I mean, he does an excellent job.
Yeah. Well, Director Paulsen, and he's also really good at communicating that. He
Yes.
has a very straightforward way that he presents information. I mean,
I mean,
yeah.
he did the same kind of at our tax.
Yeah,
day
it was
lunch.
a similar thing, and
Yeah.
we've referenced back to that several
Mhm.
times,
Yeah.
talking about, you know, what is the projected cost of government
Mhm.
on our current trajectory, and what are the long-term projected revenues
Yeah.
based on historical trends and where we're at now, and projected future reductions in revenue based off of the tax bills that we've done. We know those are all happening,
Yeah.
and Director Paulsen very clearly set out that no, this all still works, and we're not going to be a Minnesota,
That's right. Yeah.
which is now, I think, some of these states we hold out as the example of what not to do.
Mhm. Yeah.
But no, there's no question that Director Paulsen's an asset to the state of Iowa, and working for the taxpayers. Former Speaker of the House, he was my speaker for 5 years. Leader a couple years before that. So yeah, no, he knows his stuff. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about it. And then legislative panel also, they
Yes,
bring together
that was-
some a panel that I've sat on
Yes.
several
Yeah.
times.
Yep.
But tell me about the legislative panel.
Yeah, the most exciting thing came with there was a series of different tax policy issues and budget issues that were discussed at the legislative panel. But I think for our purposes, the most exciting was the discussion on income tax reform coming up in the 2024 session. And there was 4 legislators there. I want to highlight 2. From the House, you had Representative John Wills, and then from the Senate, you had the Ways and Means Chair, Senator Dan Dawson. And I thought Senator Dawson laid out a very clear agenda for what, at least speaking for the Senate side, what they want to do. And basically, the Senate, as Senator Dawson said, their goal, their ultimate goal, is to eventually eliminate the income tax.
Yeah.
And I think basically, and we've talked about some of his, the bill that he introduced this session, and I think that's going to be sort of a framework, the way he was talking, that it would, because we're in such a good financial situation, they would accelerate some of the existing tax rate reductions that were from the 2022 law, and then sort of speed those up, and then lower the rate to, there wasn't any numbers given, but I think that the target is around 2.5%, and then sort of using the taxpayer relief fund as a long-term mechanism to slowly eliminate the income tax. And I think, Senator Dawson was very passionate in addressing why this is important for the state of Iowa to do.
Yeah.
And so I was very encouraged by what he had to say. And it's, and it just reminded me how fortunate we are. We have, leadership like that. And of course, it goes back to Majority Leader Whitver as well. I mean, just sort of as leading that caucus, and all the good policies that are coming out.
Yeah, and I think too, my perspective is clearly Senator Dawson has been out in front on this, offered a bill last year, and really talking about potential elimination of the income tax. But I think, to be perfectly fair, I'm hearing that from both the House and the Senate and the governor's office, that there is a shared interest in taking a big step forward on all this. And I was just thinking about this when we were talking about Director Paulsen and his tenure as speaker, and he was speaker for 5 years. But we have had this group of leaders in place. Now, some of the committee chairs have changed for a long time now. It's really kind of rare, because a lot of times these leaders and governors kind of cycle through.
Yeah.
But those between Governor Reynolds, Leader Whitver, and Speaker Grassley, I think have all now been in those spots together for 4 or 5 years now. Four.
Yeah.
But that continuity
Mm-hmm.
Makes it easier to get things done sometimes.
Yes.
Sometimes it's
I
more
think that's a
difficult.
good
You get a
point.
little kind of entrenched in your ways, but it looks like they have built this framework where they know each other's moves, they know each other's caucuses and what they can and can't do and how to, and it's really worked pretty well.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraged by that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a great set of leaders,
Yeah.
committee chairs that really feels like continuing to still move forward on this
But I think
path towards income tax reductions.
I think this coming session is going to be very exciting for tax reform. And I think Iowa's going to do some good things. The other thing I want to mention that Senator Dawson did is the of course, property tax became a issue of discussion during the forum, and Senator Dawson provided a good defense of the property tax bill that they passed this session, and basically making the justification that a lot of the complaints that we're seeing from cities and counties and public libraries really is not holding water. And I thought he did a good job kind of defending that bill and explaining what it really does.
And I'll go, I guess I'll even continue that thought that I had just a minute ago on this as well. Experienced, seasoned legislators that have done their homework, that have been around, are able to respond like that because they've seen it and they know.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're relatively new and you haven't been through the battle enough times and you hear this chorus of folks of, let's say your local government's coming at you, your instinct is to trust their expertise. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but like, yeah, we probably ought to work on this. My people are all upset. But if, somebody like Senator Dawson that's like, you know what? No, guys, that's not what we're doing. You're going to have to figure out a way to make it work. And to be able to just have that conviction to say that. I know we talked about this. Senator Ken Rosenboom did that really well with some of those folks as well.
Absolutely.
A former county supervisor who said, show me the list. And that experience that comes from having these folks that have been in the trenches and fought this fight, it's another place where it manifests itself as really valuable.
Yeah.
To be able to just have the conviction that, no, this is what we've done and now we're going to make it work. And I
that's a great point.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all very good as well. Okay. So kind of last major theme here, John. I'm actually a little disappointed today. I had hoped that we would have polling results we could go over. So we're going to have to wait on that. Where,
hopefully tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully tomorrow. So when you put a poll in the field in Iowa right now, I mean, okay, listeners, think about this. Are you answering every unknown phone call that comes into your phone right now? Most Iowans are not.
Yeah. And
that makes it really difficult on pollsters to get enough completes on a live call sample. So anyway, we have a poll in the field right now in partnership with National Taxpayers Union. But in the meantime, I think we should talk a little bit about the Des Moines Register. Had a poll on the caucus that came out. And I know that we are all supposed to say that the Des Moines Register's Iowa poll is the best, that we're conditioned to say that. And I do think it is I do think they're very good at it. I really do. And I think there are some methodologies in there that are really, very well thought out. However, they do not always get it right, as evidenced
That's right.
in the midterms. And you saw how all over the place they were, specifically with the Attorney General's race.
That's right.
Now, and I also know that I have had multiple ITR members come up to us and say, when's your poll coming out? Because the ITR poll is the only one I trust.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if I'm going to go quite that far, but we're going to lean into that anyway. But so most of our listeners pay attention to this kind of stuff, John. So the top line numbers in the poll are what they are. 51% of respondents in this poll said they were going to support Donald Trump in the caucus. 19 for Ron DeSantis, 16 for Nikki Haley. Here's my fundamental concern about this. There's no doubt in my mind that right now, as it stands today, Donald Trump is winning the Iowa caucuses, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with
Yeah.
these kind of
Yeah, I think
numbers, there's no debunking a poll that's going to undo that. Right now, that's the case. However, there are a lot of people in the Des Moines Register's Iowa poll survey. I'm not sure actually going to be there on caucus night. They dialed randomly statewide and then asked them, are you going to go to the poll? Are you going to go to the Iowa caucuses? 51% of those people said, I'm definitely going to the Iowa caucus. The other 49 were maybes, but yet they still included them in the sample. So I think what my concern with this is, John, you have a whole bunch of people that you've included in your poll that really may not actually be there.
Yes. Yeah.
On caucus night, because this isn't like a primary. You just show up and vote. You got to go and spend an hour there. If you have a really good precinct chair, you might be able to get out there pretty quick, but it
takes some time.
It's an investment of time. It's a party building exercise.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder about what that really looks like. And so
I think that's a fair point to make. And the other thing is, I still think, I mean, even though poll after poll has shown former President Trump ahead, I still think it's a very fluid process. And yes. I think what you said is key, because turnout is going to be crucial for all the candidates, and who can get their people to show up.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And
so a few of the numbers, if thinking about this idea of how big is the universe of voters in this survey, that just I can't get there on. They just don't. Sometimes your own gut tells you that's not right. Mm-hmm. So they ask a favorable, unfavorable rating. And the Des Moines Register's poll would say that 20% of Iowa caucus goers, not Iowans, not even Iowa Republicans, of the folks that will show up on a cold January night, that 20% of them disapprove of the job Kim Reynolds is doing as governor. I can't get there, John.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some people that may not be there on the Republican side. But you and I are active in those circles.
Yes. Yeah.
Republicans in this state approve of the job that Kim Reynolds is doing as
Absolutely.
governor. Not 1 in 5 saying they disapprove.
Yeah. I have not met any.
Here's another one I want to try on for you. So they asked kind of these ratings on different figures. Are they too moderate, too conservative, just about right? 20% in this survey of Iowa caucus goers, generally the more conservative are the people that show up. 20% said that Ron DeSantis is too conservative. You buying that one?
No.
You may not be a Ron DeSantis supporter. You may still be with Trump. You may be with Nikki Haley or whoever.
Yep.
But I don't know that the criticism I hear of Ron DeSantis is that he's too conservative for Iowa Republicans.
Yeah, I don't.
These things, they just don't add up.
That's right.
So I do really like one thing that the Register does, though, is they ask about second choices. And because I think if you're still actively considering, it kind of shows like what's the top end that you could get, right? Because sometimes being second choice matters. And that really comes out a lot different. Trying to find it on here. Oh, yeah. So they kind of talk about it, a combined footprint, but Donald Trump, his combined footprint, first and second choice plus considering, is 76%. So 3 out of 4 Iowa Republicans. But Governor DeSantis still has 30% of people list him as their second choice, 18% actively considering. His combined footprint is 67. And then there's a big drop off after that.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, if you look just behind that top line number, that 51-19, my perspective is that it is closer than that right now. And it will close in the next month as we get close to this. And I think you tend to agree with me.
Yes. Yeah.
This is not a blowout right now.
No.
And that this will tighten.
And I'm not I don't have any experience in campaigns or anything, but if I was advising any candidate.
But you're one of the hosts of the ITR Live.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's just, okay. All right.
Yeah. But I would advise any candidate, don't take anything for granted.
No.
Because it's, like I said, it's still fluid, and I think you're absolutely right.
So I don't know what our poll will say. I don't have any preview, my one prediction, John, is that top line number is closer than
Yeah.
the Des Moines registers.
One thing I was thinking about, and I could be wrong, and as I saw this, I don't know if this is breaking news, but before we started recording, I saw a headline where in New Hampshire, their governor Sununu is going to endorse Nikki Haley. And so I wondered if she's gonna kind of focus her attention more on New Hampshire now instead of Iowa.
I wonder. So much of this is the expectations game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what I think would be dangerous for Nikki Haley if it looks like she will finish third in Iowa, is to have people expecting her to do better and then she disappoints, because that takes the wind out of your sail.
That's right. Yeah.
And New Hampshire is a completely different game. I don't profess to understand it like I do Iowa, but that doesn't surprise me that Chris Sununu would be with Nikki Haley. That seems to be a fit for him. But yeah. And I think it seems like the Nikki Haley plan is to stay alive until South Carolina and see what happens.
I think that's right.
But we'll see. So anyway, that's the appetizer for the ITR Foundation poll. When we actually get to the gold standard, and we'll have that. So, but yeah, stay tuned. This is not over.
No,
it's not by any stretch of imagination. Anything else you had, John? I know you wanted to talk about ITA, and we kind of got there.
Yeah, and I just like I said, I think there's some good things going on with policy in Iowa. From a tax perspective and for making government more efficient, more responsible to the taxpayer. And so I was very encouraged by that, by listening to Director Paulsen and Senator Dawson.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we're going to have more to say in the run-up to the kickoff of the legislative session, which will start the second week of January.
That's coming up.
And we'll be back with a lot of preview on that. So, but we're off to the races already.
That's right.
All right, John, thanks a lot. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live. Oh, no, I didn't hit record.